Okay, so today we start with the unit one, that is junction diodes.
Sir, Karthik is waiting in lobby, sir. He's saying that to allow him.
His name is like Pixie Mox. I don't know.
Okay, sir, I'll say him to change his name.
Yeah, uh, we are starting the unit first, junction diodes. So in this, the outline is basically we will discuss different type of materials that we use in electronics. And basically, there are three types: conductors, semiconductors, and insulators. Then we go specifically about semiconductors, and we see what are the different type of semiconductors. These are like intrinsic and extrinsic. And then further we go for extrinsic semiconductors. We have N-type semiconductors and P-type semiconductors. Then we will see how to form a diode, a PN junction diode. Then after making it, we will see the IV characteristics of a diode. And in the further classes, we will go for avalanche breakdown and Zener breakdown. These are two mechanisms that exist in a diode. We will discuss these topics. Okay. So, okay. So materials based on resistance, we have three different categories. One are called conductors, another are called semiconductors, and the third one is called insulators. So conductors basically, as we all know, are metals. Okay, metals are the very good conductors of heat and electricity, and metals have very uh, low resistance. Okay, that's why they are conducting current. So these are the low resistance materials, and they are very good conductors. Then we have another category which are called insulators. They have very high resistance, and when they have high resistance, they do not conduct any current across or through them. So that's why we call them insulators. And then we have a materials which are intermediate between these two. Those are called semiconductors, and they have resistance also intermediate. So they have an intermediate resistance. Okay, so based on resistance, we will basically divide into three categories. And then, as we all know, Ohm's law. As we know, Ohm's law is I is proportional to V. That is, current through a resistor is proportional to the voltage uh, voltage across the resistor. Okay, and that's how we got the resistance. R is equal to V by I. This is one formula. R is equal to V by I. Okay, so this formula everyone knows. R is equal to V by. This is called Ohm's law. Then we have another formula, that is R is equal to L by A, where L is the length of the wire and A is the cross section area of the wire. So R is given by rho L by A. This is called resistivity, rho. And here we can see that resistance basically depends on the dimensions of the materials also. So if you have a very high cross section area, you will have a low resistance. So when you want to conduct very high value of currents, so you need to take a thicker wire. And if you want very low resistance, high resistance, so you need to take a thin wire. So a thin wire will basically have higher resistance, and a thick wire will have a low resistance. And the unit, as we all know, is omega meter or omega centimeter we can take. Then we have this particular resistivity which is independent of any dimensions. So it is purely a material property. Resistance is a depends on the dimensions, but resistivity does not depend on any dimensions of the material, and that's why it's a material property. And uh, the inverse of this resistivity is called the conductivity. So lower the resistivity, higher will be the conductivity of the material. Okay. So for conductors, here we have some values of different metals like copper, gold, platinum, and silver. Okay, so these are the resistivity values, rho. Here we can see that copper has a 15.7 into 10 to power minus 9 resistivity. minus 9 means very low value of resistivity. Similarly, gold has a bit higher resistivity than the copper. It's 22.8. Then platinum still higher, 98 into 10 to power minus 9 omega meter ohm meter. So we say it's a highest in the metals having highest resistivity. Then silver is the least resistivity with 14.6 into 10 to power minus 9. So we use basically copper wires in our all the connecting wires, not silver, because silver is basically a costly. Okay, silver is costly, so we cannot go for silver. We basically go for copper, which are not very costly and also have a low resistivity. So we use copper as the connecting wires. Coming to semiconductors, we have basically two elemental semiconductors well known. Those are silicon and germanium. And there are many compound semiconductors. Here I have shown zinc oxide and gallium arsenide. Okay. For resistivity values will vary from 10 to power minus 3 to 10. Germanium has a sort of low resistivity, whereas silicon a bit higher, zero point 0.1 to 10 to power 3 ohm meter. Zinc oxide has very low resistivity, 10 to power minus 2 to 10 to power minus 4. Gallium arsenide still lower resistivity, 10 to power minus 6 to 10 to power minus 2 what ohm meter. Okay, so these are the different values. We can see that metals are with the order of minus 9, whereas the maximum resistivity is like minus lowest resistive value is minus 6. So these will have a resistivity which is higher than conductors. Okay, and one more parameter that resistivity depends for semiconductor is the impurity level. If the semiconductor is having some ions, metal ions, then it will automatically increase the conductivity. Similarly, another thing is crystallinity. So what do you mean by crystallinity? Crystallinity means how well ordered your material is. Like silicon basically can exist in as a silicon wafer. We say we say it's a monocrystalline, or it can also exist in amorphous form, and also it can exist in polycrystalline. Okay, so these are the different forms that a silicon can exist, and most of our devices like LEDs or LCDs, which we form by using silicon, they use polycrystalline material because monocrystalline is difficult to make. Amorphous is not very useful for device purpose. So like polycrystalline are used for device purposes. So for our purpose, we need to know that resistivity values are in the range of minus 3 to 10 to power 10. So it's very less than 10 ohm meters. Then we have the final category, that is insulators, and these are in the 10 to power 3 to up to 10 to power 14 and 17. So they have very higher values of resistivity, hence they don't conduct current across them. So wood is like 10 to power 3 to 10 to power 4. H2O is 10 to power 5. Okay, so water does not conduct electricity. This is deionized water, not the one which we drink. Our water has basically some ions inside it, so they conduct. But if you have a deionized water, so they are also insulators, 10 to power 5 ohm meters. Then glass and quartz, they are like silicon oxide. Okay, so both have very high resistivity. So these are the three categories, and for our materials. Okay. Then we discuss about semiconductors. So semiconductors have resistivity between conductors and insulators. So here we have a crystal structure, you can say, of silicon on the left side, and this is again similar thing but a bonding. So we can show either way the bonding. Either you show in atomic form or you show as sharing of electrons. Okay, so we all know that semiconductors mostly have covalent bonding. Metals have ionic bondings. Okay, so here we what is the electronic configuration for silicon? It's like 1s2, 2s2, 2p6. So it is like 10. What is then 3s2 and 3p2? So we have like 4 valence electrons, 3s2 and 3p2. They form 4 valence electrons. So we will have, so it's 14, right? 2, 6, 4, 10, and this 14. Okay, so these form hybrid orbitals, sp3 hybrid orbitals. So you will have basically 4 valence electrons, uh, 4 valence hybrid electrons. Okay, so each of these atoms will share with the neighboring atom. So you can see one atom from silicon and one electron from another atom. So they share one electron each. Similarly, we have for each silicon atoms we have almost 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 neighboring atoms, and each of sharing one electron. So we have 8 valence electrons. That's how it's filled now. So this one is more clear. So you have sharing covalent bonding. So is this clear? So we have now this type of silicon structure, and here we can see that there are no free electrons, or the electrons are basically filled in the valence shell or orbit. We don't have any free electrons. So we call this particular structure as intrinsic semiconductor. Intrinsic semiconductor. When you don't have any free electrons or any other charge carriers, we call them as intrinsic semiconductors. So here, since each silicon atom has 4 valence electrons, we call them as tetravalent atoms. Silicon is basically a tetravalent. If there are some atoms which have 3 valence electrons, we call them trivalent. So anyone can tell, like we have how many valence? An example for trivalent, like aluminium. Okay, so this particular aluminium has 3 valence electrons. Any other thing? Boron is also a 3 valence electrons. Gallium. Okay, so all these are basically indium, also a trivalent. So then we have pentavalent is like having 5 valence electrons. So like phosphorus has 5 valence electrons. Its atomic number is 15. So it has a valence of 5 electrons. Any other?
Arsenic.
It's
Nitrogen.
nitrogen has 5 valence electrons.
So,
So what is this? This if you remember the periodic table, so it's like uh, phosphor. Yeah, nitrogen is done the same table. Nitrogen, phosphorus, silver is there, and bismuth is there, I think.
bismuth is there.
So all these are basically pentavalent atoms. So you should remember at least one example like aluminium and phosphorus. Okay, these two are important to remember. Rest it's okay. Okay, so how you define a semiconductor? Semiconductor is a material with very low level of impurities, essentially as pure as can be made available through modern technology. So theoretically, it is very pure, but when you try to prepare or in industry, they will have definitely some impurities. We try to reduce to the minimum level. So all those materials with low level of impurities can be considered as intrinsic semiconductors. Okay. Then at room temperature, these intrinsic semiconductors still have 1.5 into 10 to power 10 free electrons, although it's minimum, but still we have this many number of free electrons in 1 centimeter cube of silicon material. Okay, so free electrons are still present at room temperature. So why we say room temperature? Because we have some thermal energy that are being provided to the semiconductor, and that gives us free electrons like 1.5 into 10 to power 10 in silicon. Because of thermal energy, there are formation of free electrons, and that's how these many electrons are present at room temperature. If it is 0 Kelvin, we assume that there are no free electrons in the intrinsic silicon or intrinsic semiconductor silicon. Similarly, we have germanium. Similarly, we have germanium and gallium arsenide. Okay, so these are values 1.7, 1.7 into 10 to power 6, and gallium arsenide has highest number of free electrons, 2.5 into 10 to power 13. Okay, so here gallium arsenide you can see is like this is the what you say, third column. Like silicon is the fourth column element, gallium is a third, and this is a fifth. So third, fifth is forming the another semiconductor. So we have different values of free electrons at room temperature. Okay, so always remember because of thermal energy, the semiconductor is having free electrons. Okay, then there is another term called mobility. Mobility means how the electrons move through the through the semiconductor. So it is basically in units of centimeter square voltage volts second. So we can see the higher the mobility, higher will be the flow of current possible. So again, silicon has very low mobility compared to germanium and gallium arsenide, and gallium arsenide has a higher mobility. Okay, so electrons in a gallium arsenide can be very easily flow through the um, what you say, through the gallium arsenide. Um, okay, so then we try to plot resistivity versus temperature, because we can see that as the temperature is increasing, the resistivity will change. The material is becoming higher conducting or less conducting. So this is a case of metals. You can see as you increase the temperature, the resistivity is basically increasing. Okay, so as you increase the temperature, the resistivity will increase. Whereas in this case of semiconductors, as you uh, increase the temperature, the resistivity will basically decreasing. Okay, so when the resistivity increases with temperature, we call that as positive coefficient of resistivity with temperature. So it's a positive coefficient of resistivity or resistance with temperature. And for the semiconductors, it's a negative coefficient of resistance with temperature. So why we have a this type of behavior means when you heat a metal, when you try to heat a metal, basically its resistivity increases. Why it happens? Anyone can tell me the answer? Why the resistivity of metal increases with temperature?
Number of collisions increases.
So number of collision increases means there should be more resistance, right? Okay,
Okay.
so that's the simple answer. As you increase the temperature, there is a more collisions, and automatically the resistivity will increase. And in the case of semiconductors, the resistivity decreases because then we have more number of free electrons, which are basically decreasing the resistivity. Okay, so this should be very clear, because in interviews they ask simple questions like why semiconductors have a positive or negative and why it is so. Okay, so you should know the things. Then suppose we connect this particular uh, intrinsic semiconductor to a potential V or a battery. Okay, just connecting it, and we want to see how the current will flow, because we know that there are free electrons at room temperature. But still, once a electron jumps out, so let's say there is an electron present here at position A, and it jumps out of the orbit. Okay, and we have an empty space remaining in this particular position A. We call this as hole. Okay, we call this as hole. And uh, when you apply a potential, so current will basically flow from particular direction, this one. So that means electrons are attracted towards the positive plate. So electrons will move in the towards the positive plate. So from right to left. So what happens? As you see, the electron in the position B, it will jump from B to A. And so we will have a hole here. We will form a hole at the position B. Then electron from C will jump to B, and then we have a hole here. And in the similar fashion, electrons from position D will jump to position C, and we create a hole at position D. And electron from E jumps to D, and we have a hole here. So we can see that as electrons are moving from right to left towards the positive plates, holes also moves through the material from right to left and reaches the another end of the semiconductor. Okay, so once the holes reaches here, the electrons which are flowing in this circuit, they will actually jump back to the hole at the edge. So they recombine and neutralize each other. So in this way, we can see electrons are basically flowing throughout the circuit. So electrons flow inside the semiconductor and also in the conducting wire, while we have holes which do not flow in the wire, but holes do move inside the semiconductor. So this is one point to remember, that electrons flow throughout the circuit, whereas holes do not move throughout the circuit. They just move inside the circuit, sorry, inside the semiconductor. Is this clear? How the electrons are moving inside the intrinsic semiconductor, silicon, and how holes are formed, and how holes are also moving inside the semiconductor. Okay, so this is a sort of pictorial representation of current flow in the intrinsic semiconductor. Okay, so we don't have any impurities in this particular case. So now we can move to a case called extrinsic semiconductor. So we have already seen intrinsic semiconductors. Now we have a case where we have either an extra electron, we call the presence of free electrons, or we have a lack of electrons and a hole is formed. So when you add a pentavalent atoms, okay, so you basically add pentavalent. So what are pentavalent? Just now we discussed. It is the atoms with 5 valence electrons. Okay, so phosphorus is a pentavalent, so you added into a silicon. So basically a pentavalent atom is replacing a silicon from its structure, and now the 4 electrons of the phosphorus are being shared similar to the silicon, and the 1 electron is being free inside the crystal structure. Okay, so we getting 1 extra free electron because of phosphorus. Similarly, if you have uh, a trivalent atoms, so here we have boron is a trivalent atom. So boron have basically 3 valence electrons. So it is sharing 3 electrons, but there is a lack of 1 electron. So it is forming a hole. Whole concept is whenever you don't have a electron, so all the electrons in the structure, they have some effect on the particular vacant space. So we represent that particular concept as hole. So it is equivalent to the effect of remaining electrons to the property, and we compensate it by saying that a hole is present at the position. So there is a hole. Okay. So when you have an excess electrons in a structure, we call it n-type semiconductor. And when you have a lack of a valence electron or a hole is present, we call it as p-type semiconductor. So both these are basically extrinsic semiconductors. Silicon is intrinsic, and n-type and p-type are extrinsic semiconductors. Okay, so n-type will have more number of free electrons, and p-type will have more number of holes. Holes are basically positive charged, okay, carriers. So here we can read diffused impurities with 3 valence electrons are called acceptor atoms. So uh, boron is a acceptor. So we call boron as acceptor because it can take electrons, and corresponding material is known as p-type material. Whereas diffused impurities with 5 valence electrons are called donor atoms, and the corresponding material is known as n-type material. So here the phosphorus is a donor because it is donating 1 valence electron to the crystal. Is this clear? N-type and p-type. In the n-type we have more number of electrons, and in p-type we have more number of holes. Okay. So now if it is clear, one thing more is that when you have free electrons, that doesn't mean that it does not have holes. It may also have holes, but very minimum number of holes present, but maximum number of free electrons. Similarly, in the p-type, we may also have holes present, but sorry, we may have also electrons present, but there are very minimum, whereas holes are in a as a major carriers. Okay, so we redraw these p-type and n-type materials. P-type are the ones where we have doped with acceptor atoms. Okay, so we have acceptor ions. So those boron atoms are like acceptor ions because they accept the electrons, so they'll get negative charged. So that's why I have represent all the. So these particular circles are acceptor ions, and they are all assigned with negative sign because once they accept the electrons, they have a negative charge. So these are negatively charged ions. And in p-type, you know, there are maximum number of holes. So we can see H is denoting the holes. H is basically denoting the holes. They are called the majority carriers. And also in the p-type, we may have some electrons present. They are called the minority carriers. So in p-type, holes form the majority carriers and electrons form the minority carriers. And also there is acceptor ions. So this is how your p-type uh, semiconductor should be represented. Now coming to n-type, we know n-type will have more electrons. Okay, and here we have donor ions. That's why we assign them as positive charged ions. Okay, so they are positively charged because they give up one electron. So they are positively charged, and we have more number of electrons. Also, similarly, they may have also holes present. Here, electrons are the majority carriers and holes are the minority carriers. So we should know for n-type, electrons are majority carriers and holes are minority carriers. Okay, so Sai Pavan. Okay, so these two are clear. P-type and N-type, we should not confuse with either ions or the majority carriers or the minority carriers. So if you remember at least one, automatically the other one will be easy to remember. So if you remember N-type, you should know electrons are the majority carriers, holes are the minimum carriers, and there are positive charged ions present in the N-type semiconductor. One important thing is that although there are negatively charged ions and electrons and holes, this whole particular box, or you can say the semiconductor, is neutral. It does not have a charge. The overall charge on this overall semiconductor is zero. So it's a neutral, although there are ions present, but the overall charge on this semiconductor is neutral, similar to the and similar case for the p-type and n-type also. Is this clear? Okay, so if it is clear, we will go for a situation where we merge or combine the n-type and p-type. So here we have p-type and here we have n-type. So what we do is basically we will bring together and that forms a PN diode. So this is basically a PN diode structure. So it forms a PN diode. Okay. In real situations, what we do is we cover half of the diode intrinsic semiconductor and we dope with pentavalent atoms, so that forms the n-type. Then you cover the pentavalent side and you dope the other remaining with a trivalent atoms, so that forms the p-type. So that's how in the real situation a diode is formed. Okay, so when the p-type and n-type materials are joined together, they form a diode. As the two materials are joined, electrons and holes in the region of junction will combine, resulting in lack of carriers in the region near the junction. Okay, so we have carriers all over the semiconductors in n-type and p-type, but when you bring them together, what will happen? The electrons from the n-type and holes from the p-type, they recombine, and in this region, which is called as depletion region, there is no carriers present. So in this particular region where you can see only ions but no carriers is called depletion region. So we call it depletion region because the area is depleted of free carriers. So there is no free carriers in this particular region. On the p-type, we have like negative ions, and on the n-type side, we have positive ions. Now, in this particular case, you can see a barrier is formed because this is like a negative plate and this is like a positive plate. So I can say this is like negative plate and this is like a positive plate. Okay, so it has its own potential. So because of this ion formed, there is a barrier potential which is formed. Okay, so different semiconductors will have different barrier potential values. So for silicon, anyone knows what is the barrier potential value? Anyone who can tell what is the barrier potential for silicon case, silicon diode? So it is around 0.7 volts. So unless you apply 0.7 volts, there is no flow of current. So we will come across it for germanium. It is around 0.3 volts. Okay. So this barrier potential is formed because of the depletion region in a diode. Okay. So when you bring p-type and n-type, you are basically forming a diode. In a short time, electrons and holes in this particular region will recombine and neutralize each other. So this region will have no carriers, and hence it is called depletion region. So this particular case is called no bias case. Bias means voltage. Okay. So VD is equal to VD means voltage across the diode is 0 volt. We are not applying any external source or a potential. So it's free, but there exists some barrier potential of about 0.7 volt for silicon diode. Okay, so when no bias is applied, the majority charge carriers cannot cross across the depletion region due to lack of kinetic energy, while the magnetic gas from either side get attracted, positive or negative ions in the depletion region crosses it. However, the net flow of charge in any one direction semiconductor diode is zero under no bias conditions. Okay, so again, because we have here the positive ions, so holes cannot go from this direction to the n-type. So holes cannot move from p-type to n-type because there is a resistance from the positive ions. Similarly, we have negative ions here, and they will repel these electrons from moving from n-type to p-type. So in other side, majority carriers don't flow, but we can see there are holes present here. These holes are being attracted by the negative ions. So holes from the n-type can move into the p-type, and electrons from the p-type can move into the n-type because these particular positive ions and negative ions, they attract the minority carriers from the either side. But the overall flow of charge across this particular diode is 0. Okay, so there are a few things. Is it clear? Is it clear? So I will move to the next point. Uh, we apply a positive potential now. So we have here p-type, and here we have n-type. So now I connect a positive plate to the p-type and a negative plate to the n-type, or a negative potential. So what will happen? My depletion region is reduced. Okay, because there are more number of electrons that are being entered, and once you apply above the barrier potential, uh, there is a possibility of flow of majority carriers. There is a flow of majority carriers through the depletion region. Here holes can move from the p-type to n-type, and electrons move from n-type to p-type under this particular bias where VD is greater than 0. Okay, so there is a flow of current when you apply some potential across the diode. So this particular situation, when you connect a p-type material to the positive potential and n-type material to the negative potential, is called forward bias. So in forward bias, the diode is connected in this particular form. Okay, and the second point is the depletion width of the depletion region is decreased. Why it is decreased? Because there is a positive potentials. So this positive plate pushes these holes towards the n-type, and electrons are being pushed towards the p-type. Okay, so they do combine and resulting in the decrease of width of depletion region. So in the forward bias, we have current flowing across the diode. Okay, so this is a case of forward bias. Okay, so holes will move in these directions, and okay, so electrons in this direction. Then we have this current is basically in milliamperes, so it's a more value. Then we have a case where we apply a reverse potential. Okay, in the reverse potential, what will happen? I am connecting the p type to the negative plate and n type to the positive plate. So the electrons are being uh, pulled from the positive plates. Similarly, electrons from this plate move uh, towards the p type. So the holes will recombine at this end, and electrons being taken away from this end. So resulting holes are moving in this particular direction and electrons in this direction. So that results in a higher depletion region, or a width of depletion region is increased in the case of reverse bias. So there is no flow of majority carriers across the depletion region. So we don't have a majority carrier flow. But what happens, we have these positive ions. What these positive ions will do, they will attract the minority carriers. What is the minority carrier in p type? In the p type, the minority carrier is electron. So electron is being attracted by these positive ions. Similarly, these negative ions, they will attract holes from the n type. So either side is attracting minority carriers. So there is a flow of minority carriers. So current is present due to minority carriers in the case of reverse bias, and we call it as saturation current. So this is indicated as saturation current. Okay, is this clear? So what are the points to remember? In the reverse bias, we connect a positive plate, sorry, a p-type material with a negative plate, and an n-type material with a positive plate. Then as you apply the potential, there is an increase in width of the depletion region. This is the second point. Okay, so there was a little problem with power. Can you people listen me? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So we are discussing about reverse bias. So what we discuss is when the p-type is connected to the negative plate and n-type is connected to the positive plate, we are basically forming a reverse bias structure. And due to this reverse bias, the holes are attracted towards the negative plate and electrons are attracted towards the positive plate, resulting in a higher width of depletion region across the junction. So this particular is called the junction. That's why it's called a PN junction. Okay, P type and N type, and this junction, and the depletion region is formed at the junction. And when the width is increased, these positive ions they repel the holes, the majority carriers from the P type, and these negative ions they repel the electrons from the N type. But they do attract the minority carriers. That means the positive ions will attract electrons from P type, and negative ions are attracting holes from the N type. So that results in some current called saturation current. So in the reverse bias, we do have current. It is denoted by Is, called the saturation current. Okay. So current in the reverse bias exists only due to the minority carriers. Whereas in case of forward bias, current exists because of majority carriers and minority carriers. But since minority carriers current is very minor because it's in microamperes, so that doesn't count much. And the majority carrier currents gives a current in milliamperes. So here we have current Is, it's in basically microamperes. So these two few points you have to remember. So a simple question can be asked in the exam: draw a PN junction diode and discuss how the depletion region is formed, and you have to discuss how the current is forming. Okay, so when you plot it in the form of IV, so we have current in the y-axis and voltage in the x-axis. So VF is like forward bias. So when you apply a positive potential, okay, so this is a positive potential case. So initially there is a very low value of current. So up to a certain point, because you have uh, a situation. Uh, you basically know that in a forward bias, you are forming a barrier potential. Okay, and until you apply a voltage which is greater than this barrier potential, there is no increase of current. Very low amount of current exists below the barrier potential. So you need to apply potential, a forward bias potential, more than the barrier potential, and beyond the barrier potential, there is a sudden increase in the value of current. Okay, so for silicon it is like 0.07 volt. So you should have VD, the potential should be greater than 0.7 volt. Then you will have an increase in the current. And similarly, when case of uh, germanium, you should have a diode voltage more than 0.3 volt. So then you have current in the forward bias. So this is clear. So here we can see that this is not like Ohm's law, a straight line. It's a non-linear structure or a plot. When you come to the reverse bias, when you are applying reverse bias to the diode, initially there is a current. You can see it's a saturation current which is very constant. Okay, up to a certain point. So let's say this is VBD, breakdown region. Okay, so until VBD is reached, the current in the diode is constant, denoted by Is. But beyond a certain voltage called the breakdown voltage, the current is increasing very suddenly. Okay, so this particular region is called breakdown region. Okay, so current will flow very at a very high rate. You can see current increases at a very fixed value of potential. So this is called the breakdown region. So we have this IV characteristics for the diode. So anyone asks what is IV characteristic, you have to plot this particular diagram: forward bias, reverse bias. In the forward bias, you have to represent what is the barrier potential, or you can say VP, knee voltage, VK, sorry, VK, knee voltage you have to show. Okay, and important, as we know, current in the forward bias is in milliamperes, whereas current in the reverse bias is in microamperes. So depending on the application device, we can either choose the forward bias case or the reverse bias case. So we have like Zener diode, which we study in the future classes, that works in the reverse bias case. Okay, so this is the IV characteristic of a practical diode. If you consider a ideal case, you will have a particular this type of thing. So you don't have any current up to the knee voltage. At this point only we have current. So this is an ideal case. and there is no current in the reverse bias case. So ideally it's like a switch. So in the forward bias there is a flow of current, or you can say switch on, and when it is reverse bias you can say switch is off or open. Okay, so that's all. So I will share this link uh, to you guys video. If any doubts are there, please ask. We have 5 more minutes. So because of PPT, we are a bit quick compared to the offline classes. Because if you have to make the PPT, means if you have to write down and draw all these diagrams, it will take a bit time. But that is good that we will have a lot more time saving process. Okay. So any questions in forward bias, reverse bias, or in the case of no bias, how the depletion region is formed, or what is knee voltage? So these things you practice, and over a time it is easy, because people get confused. People don't remember whether the ions are acceptor ions or the donor ions, whether holes are the majority carriers or the minority carriers. So there is a lot of confusion exist. So at least you people don't get confused in this basic things, because once you understand these things, only then in future if you are making transistors, they are yeah. So who all are present today? Almost everyone is present. Anyone absent? 19 students, no? So there are 22, so 3 are absent. So I will give you a small tutorial. Uh, so the tutorial is, so you have to, the tutorial one is, you have gallium arsenide. Okay, so you just like I have made the silicon structure, right? With sharing atoms like silicon, 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 and silicon. We have drawn like this. Similarly, you draw for the gallium arsenide case. How does the crystal structure of a gallium arsenide look like? So let's say this is the question one. You try it. Then another question I will try to give you is find the resistance. Okay, so here you have voltage and current. So this particular figure, like if you draw, so this is like delta I, and this is my delta V. So RD, resistance of the diode in the forward bias case, is like delta V by delta I. Similarly, we have resistance here in the case of reverse bias. So let's say reverse bias, and this is forward bias. So I want you people to find out the values of resistance of the diode in forward bias and in reverse bias. What are the typical values of resistance of the diode in forward bias and in reverse bias? Is it okay? Did you understand the question? Is it clear? You have to find the value of resistance of the diode in the forward bias case and the value of resistance of the diode in the reverse bias case. So definitely in the reverse bias case, the diode resistance is very high. Okay, and in the case of in the forward bias case, the resistance of the diode is low. Okay, So that you have to find what are the typical values. So you can see simply here, like it will be in kilo ohms and it will be in mega ohms. Okay, so anyhow that we can simply see milliamperes. So it will be like in kilo ohms, and here we have in mega ohms. So this is the order of resistance of a diode in forward bias case. So this is a forward bias region and this is a reverse bias region. So you should also remember the typical values of resistance. So try to find these values for silicon, uh, okay, silicon and germanium. Okay. So we see tomorrow about this breakdown region. What are the different mechanisms that exist? Basically, there are two mechanisms. One is avalanche breakdown, another is Zener breakdown. So tomorrow we discuss those two topics, and we will continue with transistors. Okay, but if you have anyone has any doubts, please do ask me. Okay, okay then. Thank you for today.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
sir.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
sir.
Yeah, yeah. Bye.
Bye, sir.
Bye, sir.